I call the Joint Assembly Juneau School District Facilities Committee meeting to order at 12:02 p.m. on August 3rd. I will try to keep this to close at noon if possible, but we may go later because one of our esteemed members has a meeting at noon. At 1. Thank you. Ms. Wall, will you please say the land acknowledgement for us?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We would like to acknowledge that the city and borough of Juneau is on Tlingit land and wish to honor the indigenous peoples of this land. For more than 10,000 years, Alaska Native people have been and continue to be integral to the well-being of our community. We're grateful to be in this place, a part of this community, and to honor the cultures, traditions, and resilience of the Tlingit people. Gunas Sheesh.
Thank you, Ms. Wall. Ms. Henricks, will you please call roll?
Madam Mayor.
Here.
Chair Hale.
Here.
Ms. Wall.
Present.
Ms. Sorensen. Here. Mr. Holst.
Here.
And Mr. Muldoon is absent.
Ms. Gladaszewski.
Ms. Gladaszewski. Here.
Thank you. Are there any changes to the agenda? Seeing none, we will proceed with this agenda. Are there any changes to the minutes from the June 28, 2023 meeting? Seeing none, those minutes are approved. No items for action, but we're moving right into informational items. Ms. Kester, item number 2, I guess that might be me. Should I just go right ahead? Okay, so during the June 28, 2023 meeting, we primarily worked on variables in the matrix. What I will say relative to page 5, which is our 2023 goals for this committee, is we need to be thinking about the 3rd and 4th bullet. We've spent a lot of time on the 2nd bullet of the 2nd bullet, the matrix, where we've been working a lot on that. And we need to be thinking about how to put that into a form that we can then have a visual of and start to populate, but also need to be thinking about forwarding that prioritized plan for facilities major maintenance and establishing the framework for future committees, because this is August and this assembly year will soon be over. So we'll probably squeeze in, I'd like to squeeze in 2 meetings in September if we can. And try to wrap up the work of this committee for this assembly year. Does anybody have any thoughts or objections to that goal? Thank you. We will move on then, Ms. Kester, to item 3 on the agenda, which is the draft school facilities evaluation matrix version 8.03.23.
Thank you, Chair Hale. On page 6 of your packet, you have updates of the, I consider this the key for the matrix. So this will travel with the matrix. You don't have a updated version of the matrix just because some of these variables became difficult to populate beyond what you've already seen. So thought we would get some consensus on some of the changes that have been made. And if after reviewing the packet, which has the packet of this meeting is quite dense, of course, because we include this CDJ JSD facility master plan draft, which has a lot of really good thought work in it on how to address this problem. So the purpose of this is to update you on the changes. The changes are the asterisk item. So we'll go down. Pupil teacher ratio is moved to quantitative. The committee asked to add high school graduation rate. I think graduation rate was the conversation, but in conversation with the superintendent, really the only logical graduation rate would be high school graduation rate. Predicted future enrollment by grade level. The committee wanted to do some work on getting that data. Demographic diversity. I'll just pause here to make sure that that definition captures the committee's intent.
And I'm not seeing any raised hands from the committee. Is that good? Looks like. Okay, thank you.
And then we talked about having a non-instructional maintenance and operations category. Obviously, the more we get, the further we get down any type of decision making with the matrix, we would want to look at instructional and operational and maintenance savings. That's really an exercise that's it's going to take a lot of time. So looking at a snapshot of like, is this building, because it's old and hasn't been updated, a lot more expensive to maintain than this other facility, is that kind of facility placeholder at the time. So those are the changes. I'm happy to answer any questions on those, and then would love to hear any committee conversation on the matrix and any study that they were able to do of the draft plan that they may or may not want to incorporate into this matrix.
Do we have insights or comments from committee members?
Just a question.
Yes, thank you.
Just a question. Do you have the matrix somewhere? I could have a copy.
I have the draft matrix was in your last packet, and I'm happy to I think I even have one in my purse I could give you guys.
Well, I mean, if you just said, do we have any comments on the matrix? I can't remember what it says.
Oh, I'm sorry. I should have been more clear on the matrix key, which really is just defining the categories.
I think my comment, and it relates to what I said a little bit earlier, is we've, I think, done a really good job digging into what the variables should be. And I know it's awkward, that matrix is awkward because it's big. But maybe you could kind of talk us through how you see the population of that matrix occurring within this committee structure or outside of it, if that's necessary.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So I think populating the matrix is really a staff function, because the committee has given us guidance on what that's where the key is involved, the definitions of those categories. And so then I would, Superintendent Hauser and I and Director Olin would work on, getting all that data. And I think some will be more staff intensive than others. We already experienced this when trying to do the Thunder Mountain and JSD just as our first test run. So how I would see that happening is, we would get to work at the direction of the committee and bring you a draft, and the draft would have some holes. I think holes like impacts to the community. Those are the type of holes that really need broader input than the two of us, right? That's a community. But then if there's things like operational costs, people teacher ratio, predicted enrollment, those types of categories are categories that staff would work on. So I think the yeoman's work of that rests on staff to then bring you back a draft full of holes, some holes of which you will debate and question, some holes which we will need you to fill in, and some holes we will say we really can't fill this item out until we're a little bit further down the path.
Thank you. That's excellent. And please note for the record that Mr. Muldoon has joined us. Ms. Gladys.
I'm not sure if other committee members feel, I thought it was useful to see the matrix with some population information in it, rather than just sort of abstract. And I don't know if everyone feels comfortable enough with the matrix as it is to have staff go through all the schools and fill the entire thing in, or if we want to have another, like just fill in 2 schools and come back, so that in case there's something.
I think my concern about that is that we're running short
Out of time.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so perhaps staff can make that effort between now and our next meeting, knowing that we might want to be tweaking some things after we see it. So maybe not the end all be all effort at this point. Ms. Sorensen.
Well, I've kind of, while we've generously volunteered staff, I want to make sure our staff is feeling comfortable with this, or if there is some desire to maybe do something more along the lines of what Ms. Gladachevsky has said relative to doing, maybe trying some different grade levels and seeing how that all looks.
Well, thank you, Ms. Sorensen. Superintendent Hauser, how comfortable are you feeling with kind of jumping in, you and Director Olin, obviously?
Well, thank you through the chair. Chair Hale, I feel pretty comfortable, but of course, the start of the school year is always a busy time for not only the central office and the staff that will be working on putting together the information that is being requested, but also across the district, the support that the central office does for the teachers and everything else. It is also a time when we're preparing for our audit. So that does take a lot of time from the business office and from administrative services. And so I feel like we can start working on doing some of the work, starting putting some of the information in the matrix, looking at some of the quantifiable data that's requested and starting to put that together. So we start to flesh it out a little bit more, start seeing how it looks and see if there's any potential changes that, the committee would like us to make as we're kind of going through that process. To get it complete, I think that'd probably be a pretty heavy lift, just with everything else at the beginning of the year, but we can definitely start putting the information in there and at least giving it, is this showing us what we want it to show us, and hopefully eliciting a few more questions through the process.
Thank you. Did you have any follow-up? Madam Mayor? Thank you. That sounds great.
Yeah, even if we had your best guess at this time and we wouldn't hold you to anything, big draft, or even instead of Mendenhall River School, call it Mendenhall Lake School, but just so we had some numbers or something so we can see what it looks like would be very helpful. I mean, not totally made up, but your best guess so you don't waste a lot of time, because I do know it's a busy time for you.
That would be the school floating on an iceberg. Right. Excellent. Ms. Kester. Further thoughts?
That we have enough direction to proceed. I agree with Superintendent Hauser, because having tried to fill the matrix out for just 2 schools that were relatively straightforward, it quickly gets complicated just because there are decisions that you have to make, right? Like, well, how are we going to interpret this? How are we going to get this data? So I guess I think what we're going to do is we're going to try to fill out this matrix, and my option B is going to be to make sure we include in your next meeting a school from every grade level and category.
Yeah.
To be able to at least give us the feedback that we need to work towards a more final draft.
Very good. Very good. Thank you. Excellent. Are there any further comments or questions on this agenda item? Okay, we'll move on then to CBJ and JSD investment in maintenance, and that is on page 8 of your packet. Ms. Kester.
Chair Hale, you have a memo and then a spreadsheet attached that talks about the capital investment that CBJ has made in school facilities over the last 6 years, I believe it is. And it's about $12 million. This is inclusive of the $1 million in annual deferred maintenance, and also things like roofs that were funded recently. You saw in a previous package, and now that I'm talking, I wish I would have included it here, the 6-year CIP for the school district, which is of course a much bigger number, right? When you look at like the list of projects that needs to be done, you've got a lot more on that list than has been accomplished. This list was taken partially from this CBJ JSD facilities master plan. I really think it's been, picking out kind of the more low-hanging fruit, working with the school district on some of their more immediate needs. And because one of the tasks for this committee is to come up with a prioritized plan, I wanted to give you what we have been able to do from the last effort at prioritized planning. And then also this is an opportunity to talk about the maintenance that the school district does on a regular basis. So I'm going to pause and ask if there are any questions on the capital side that CBJ engineering does before handing it over to the school district for facility maintenance.
I'm not seeing any questions. And so I think, yes, let's talk about the maintenance information, and then we'll get to the sort of the second to the last paragraph and talk about efficiencies that might be available if we somehow were able to combine maintenance. And one thing that I really want to talk about, if we do want to try to combine maintenance, as in the assembly take on some of maintenance, given the recent, what I consider strange and difficult interpretation by the Department of Education, would this factor in to that whole question about what the assembly can, what CBJ can spend money on in or out of the cap? So.
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. The Juneau School District is still currently waiting for a response. The board responded and asked for some more information from the Department of Education and Early Development. So the district is still waiting for more information for clarification on some of the items that were addressed in the deed letter that the district received on June 29th. So I'm hesitant to go and potentially answer that. I would say that, you
Yes.
know, the pieces that I would refer to, of course, this stems from impact aid and the equalization and disparity tests that the Department of Education in the state goes through is able to qualify for to meet the impact aid requirements to use impact aid funding, 90% of impact aid funding to go towards the foundation formula and how the state pays districts through the foundation formula. And so the impact aid calculation that's set in the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, which is the federal regulations, talks about expenditures and those towards free public education and in kind. As we look at facilities, and I don't have the definition in front of me, but as we look at running facilities and the cost of running facilities, which preventative maintenance and custodial would cost in the running of the facilities, that would potentially be considered to go towards what it would cost to run a school district for free public education and those instructional purposes. And so there's a very good chance that if the city were to say, we're going to give the district X number of, take over the maintenance department and give the district X number of millions of dollars, that potentially could be seen as in kind towards the free public education and going towards the cost of revenues and expenditures when they look at doing the disparity test for the federal government impact aid. Did you want to add anything to that? So we're still trying to get some clarification on that. That is, when you look at just the federal regulations, those are the pieces that we look at when we try to consider if this will be considered as a includable revenue that is determined in the calculation for the impact aid and the disparity test that the state has to run to meet the federal government's regulation requirements.
Thank you, Superintendent. Ms. Glaszewski.
All right, I have questions about this spreadsheet and how, if you, can I ask them?
Please do.
So our charter says the board does custodial services and routine, and we do big stuff, basically. So I'm confused about the nomenclature on the spreadsheet. The memo says that CBJ Engineering manages projects, and the title of a column says lead. Is that who paid or who is doing, like, I'm unclear on because it says, for example, CBJ did roof repairs for 74,000, but JSD did fire alarms for 55,000. Is the lead indicative of something? I'm just unclear on where the $1 million is versus the big bond things that we do. Is that somehow indicated on the spreadsheet?
So this spreadsheet is inclusive of the $1 million and the big bond things that you do. The $1 million all goes through CBJ Engineering, and we work with JSD on prioritizing those projects. When you see a item that says JSD lead, that means that their maintenance department is the one taking the lead on managing that project, but they're still spending funds from that $1 million. And usually that happens with all of our client departments when they're really small dollar items that are really involved, in the facility and don't need an engineer and a project management team. So that's why you will see on some of our smaller projects that JSD staff is, taking the lead on those, but those are still projects that are funded through those deferred maintenance dollars.
Okay, just to follow up to understand, like lock upgrade, 600,000, it says JSD. That's a lot of money, but that's still part of the million. So where are the ones that are part of bonds? Is that indicated somehow on here? Or no? Because like penthouse, I didn't know there was a penthouse. What is that? But anyway, penthouse siding replacement for 1.9 million. I assume that's a bond. But anyway, I just didn't, it's not indicated, or at least I can't figure it out.
So really the only bond projects are the roofs. And so the roofs are on here, but we,
The penthouse
thank
siding
you. Look,
replacement.
Cassie had the better answer. I'm gonna let her talk.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Olin.
If you look to the left column where it says CIP and it says SO2-102, that is all our deferred maintenance of the $1 million. If it has an SO2-104, that means it was a bond project.
Oh, 104. Okay, I see. Great.
That's quite handy. Thank you.
So then all of those, including the 1.9 million, was part of the million.
Correct. It's,
Okay.
yeah,
All right, so that,
carryover that we had from year to year or something along those lines. Yep.
and may I follow up again?
No, please do.
The lead is not filled out. So all these things that I kind of stopped at lead, I thought the rest of them was just guessing. I see. You did all the things that are on here with numbers in the total project cost. Right? Okay.
You'll see on the right-hand column, there are some projects that are still active.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I
All right, thank
I
you.
think
I
my
got it now.
spreadsheet was a little too detailed.
I got it now. I'm good.
And I will say that if you give Ms. Glaszewski a detailed spreadsheet, she will find things to ask good questions about. She's very good at that.
I love spreadsheets.
She does. Those are actually really good questions. Thank you. But we know that about you. Ms. Kester, I worry that may have taken us off track, and then I think Ms. Glaszewski kind of helped bring us back on track, but I want to make sure we're addressing everything we need to be addressing in this memo.
The second part that we'd like to talk about a little bit is this is what CBJ engineering does, but there's a lot that the school district does, and that's laid out in charter. School districts is in charge of janitorial and routine maintenance. And so we will be bringing you some numbers on that. There's a really good explanation of, though dated, but there's a good explanation in your draft JSD facility master plan starting on, well, I'm not even gonna tell you the page because you're gonna get all distracted by it. But anyway, it's on page 5. But this basically talks about what is what's included in that number. This is dated, it's dated, but it'll give you that overview sense. So I think if we are talking about what are there functions where CBJ could take on additional routine maintenance? We've got a really competent building maintenance division here at CBJ. We work very closely, CBJ Engineering and Building Maintenance, on prioritizing projects. We have a formula. Actually, our next PWFC meeting will be getting briefed on the prioritization process that we use, and really preventative maintenance program to make sure that we're, staying on top of our maintenance responsibilities. And so there may be some efficiencies in combining some of those functions between CBJ building maintenance and JSD building maintenance. But of course, we want the committee to understand what JSD building maintenance involves before even starting that conversation. So I will hand it over to you guys to talk about JSD building maintenance.
Madam Mayor, you want to ask a question now? Okay.
This would be directed to soon to be city manager Kester. Of all the buildings that the city has, putting the school district side, do we do maintenance, the city do maintenance on all those, or do other buildings have their own maintenance staff that isn't part of the mothership, if lack of better terms?
So building maintenance is not under engineering and public works, but we do work closely with them. And to my knowledge, if it's a CBJ facility, our building maintenance does the building maintenance. It gets confusing when you get to places like the utility, because the utility, of course, has an entire maintenance department also that does maintenance, but they don't do the building maintenance. So when something like the furnace breaks,
I'm going
we
to
still
stop
call
you because
building
I just
maintenance.
used the wrong terms.
Okay,
So engineering, public works, all your capital projects and all your projects per se, are there any other facilities that are separate or are all they all under us? That's what I meant. I understand building maintenance is under Parks and Rec. I just misused the wrong term.
Are you asking, those projects, are those managed by engineering and public works? Because we also have an airport and we have Bartlett and we have Eagle
Right,
Crest.
but I'm just, yeah.
Ooh, engineering and public works manages all capital projects for the city except for at the hospital. They have their own engineer, and except for docks and harbors who have their own engineer. And I believe it's in charter that engineering has to manage capital projects for CBJ departments.
Airport has an architect. That's right, K-Mel, that's right. Okay, now I think we're ready to turn it over to Superintendent Hauser and Director Olin.
Thank you very much to the chair. I guess as I'm transitioning on to this committee and as a new superintendent of the Juneau School District, I'll kind of highlight some of my thoughts as we start having and exploring the potential and the possibility of some shared services as I kind of think of it. As a superintendent, as a principal, as a past educator, educating students every single day when schools are in session, when I think about the possibility of shared services, the thing I always come back to and really is at the root of all my questions is, what's best for kids? How do we make sure kids have and teachers have what they need to keep the education going in the classroom, in the schools? Is it safe? These are the foundational things that we're constantly thinking about. And so when I think about the possibility and as we start exploring or there's conversations around shared services, one of the things that I really want to make sure that I articulate is the importance of if there's a situation where we run into something's happening in the classroom, there's a water leak, there's something that is potentially health safety, that we have the ability and the access to call somebody immediately and have that fixed as quickly and as efficiently as possible. One of the benefits of having our own maintenance department is I can call up the director of maintenance and say, hey, we've got this situation happening in our schools. We need to get it addressed right now. Somebody's there within 5 minutes, and if that's something that, we need to have happen, we make it happen, because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that the students are in a safe place, staff are in a safe place, and education continue to happen. When we start having this conversation, when we look at the possibility of some shared services, and again, we're just kind of exploring that now, but I would want to make sure that we know there is a priority system in place that if there's an emergency, if something gets in the way of a teacher being able to instruct in the classroom, or a situation where we need to make sure that playground equipment is repaired so it's safe for students to be on the playground, these are things that are time sensitive and need to happen quickly. And so that would be an area that would be an important piece to keep in mind. The other thing I think is important as we, are continuing to talk about this, I'm during the summer walking through a school building, it's always an odd feeling to me, because having a big building like a school empty just doesn't feel right. It doesn't have the energy and the life that a building has, a school has, when students and staff are all back. And so I'm excited for the start of the school year, so that energy is back in a building. But with energy, the exuberance of youth, comes a higher use, let's say, of some of the facilities. And so what we'll find is just by having students in the school, using the school, going through and walking through the school, carrying their lunch trays, doing everything that students do, school buildings tend to have a higher use than maybe another facility in the city. And so that would be another area that I think is important to keep in mind as we start talking about the potential for, shared services around maintenance, is that schools will have to have a lot of, work orders come through fast and furious, and we're constantly trying to keep up with just the everyday wear and tear that happens in school buildings. And of course, we do our best to be good stewards of the facilities and make sure that, we're responding and taking care of everything as quickly and efficiently as possible. But I think it's really important for everyone to understand that, we have, 4,200 students every single day coming into our schools, using the schools, learning in the schools, enjoying and having fun and being engaged in the schools. And that comes with some maintenance demands. And so that would be the one thing that I'd want to make sure that I highlighted too, as these conversations are happening, is we don't lose sight of and just consider from a square footage perspective, well, the square footage of Zontekihini is, the same as this building that is the city manages, and they really need to have one maintenance person manage that for 3 buildings. That's not probably going to be the case for our schools, because the demand will be much higher, because the use is going to be much higher. And so I'm sure there's other questions from that. That would be kind of my initial kind of conversation around, some of the, are there ways that we can streamline? We've, talked about, some asset management as we look at life expectancy of some of our equipment to be more efficient and effective at, kind of planning repairs and life expectancies, and making sure that we don't find ourselves in a situation where, oh, we had all the heaters go out because they're 5 years over life expectancy and we didn't have that on our list. And so we weren't aware of that. I mean, as we look at our schools being managed by or being owned by the city, but we use them, I think being able to share that responsibility of preventative maintenance, making sure that we're all going through and ensuring that our assets are tracked and managed in an efficient way. I think those are things that I think there's a lot of benefit to be had by sharing some of those services, since a lot of the projects that we see on here, the cost is shared between the city and the district.
That was extremely helpful, and it was really helpful conversation, and I appreciate it. And I just imagine, like, it's probably pretty rare for an assembly member to drop a pint of milk on the carpet, but it's probably not that rare in a school, especially in a grade school. And I should have prefaced this whole conversation earlier. This is just something that we're exploring because we've been looking at the charter, and if it would make sense to the school board, who is responsible for the budget, to the assembly, to, CBJ staff, if it would make sense for us to do some kind of work, and if it would pass the now changed legal interpretations, but maybe to be challenged. Anyway, so that's kind of my thinking, at least. Ms. Gladchevsky.
Thank you, Chair Hale. I appreciated that, because I was a little confused as to how we were. Did I miss a meeting, or how we were talking about the joint maintenance or whatever? I missed that thing. So who wants that, or how did that come up? Or would you completely get rid of your maintenance department? I mean, how far are these conversations? I guess you've been having them.
So Ms. Kester, do you want me to talk about it? Or would you like to? So this came up in sort of in the context of a conversation that Ms. Kester and the mayor and I had with our current city manager, Mr. Watt. It came up in the context of that conversation as we were looking at maintenance, and we were thinking about the responsibility of CBJ to do major maintenance on facilities, and then the responsibility of the school district to do sort of operational ongoing maintenance. And then looking at this section of the charter, just kind of thinking, is this ideal? And would it actually be helpful if CBJ engineering and CBJ maintenance were more involved, were able to be more helpful to the school district? Because as we know, the school district operates really on a really tight budget, very much on a shoestring. Often it has that feeling. And so are there ways that we could improve that? So that just sort of came in.
Okay.
So that's context for how this got added to this conversation of.
Because it's not in the memo, so
maintenance.
that's why I was confused.
Yes. And Ms. Kester, did you have anything to add to that, or Madam Mayor?
It's all good. Sounds great.
I'll just add that after hearing Mr. Hauser, we also thought it might be a cost savings, but it sounds like it might be an in-kind. But I would like to see the next step of a vision of what it would look like to combine, especially taking in Mr. Hauser's concerns, because but it would be nice to see what the next step you guys would think would look like, and then we can make a decision from there.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Holst, you had a comment.
Yes, I'm trying to understand how much of a change this is that we're proposing, because Ms. Kester sits on every meeting of our facilities committee at the school district, or her predecessor, or somebody from forever, because there is already what I perceive to be excellent coordination. And you pay, right? We have a discussion. We know you guys, even if we use our staff at JSD on the projects that correspond to you via charter, you're paying for, and then the things that correspond to us, we pay for, but we benefit from the coordination. So I think it works well. Are we suggesting something? I don't know what we're suggesting, because we already have this great coordination with CBJ engineering. Are we like talking about removing some of our staff and renaming them as direct employees of CBJ, and or they move to another place? I'm not sure I'm just trying to understand the distinction we're making.
Madam Mayor.
So I guess that was my question, have them look and see what it would look like to answer those kind of questions. To see what that would look like. I'm assuming most of it would be on the preventive maintenance side, and to see what putting things together would look like. It might, whatever they come up with. I didn't want to come up with it myself, and see if they put something together, does it provide efficiency? Does it provide any cost savings? And if it doesn't, then it would be thrown out the window. But if it does, then that'd be good just to look at.
And I also, if I could add, I'm the chair, I guess I can add if I want. I also see this somewhat in the context of the conversation we had during the budget cycle about Raleigh and community schools. And it's also in the context of the governor's cut to the budget and the schools receiving far less funding than they could. Obviously, it's in the context of this new decision by DEED, and we have to weigh that. But in some ways, it's, as we think about this shared responsibility that we have for facilities, what makes the most sense to provide the greatest level of service? So that's kind of how I'm seeing it. Ms. Glashevsky.
So Mr. Holtz and I are in the same place trying to understand. So it sounds like a good idea to look at, right? I mean, if it saves money and is better for everybody, let's do it. And if it doesn't, then let's not, I guess. And it really is partly, I know this isn't our charter, but also what counts for the state money. It doesn't matter who sweeps the floor. Could we take the floor cleaning? I mean, I don't know. I mean, that it will
You just turn your mic on.
will also depend on that, whether it helps the overall money situation.
Mr. Muldoon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I noted at the bottom of the memo, it says discuss and provide staff direction on additional information. Are we clear as mud on that? Do you guys need more direction? Do you at least understand kind of where we're spitballing, or?
And this is coming from another very specific data guy.
Through the chair, I would say clear as mud's a good description of where we're at. I think as we look at trying to pull together what this potentially could look like, then that just prompts more conversations. So I think we can start working towards that process, and we can start having some conversations too, and trying to at least provide a basis of a starting conversation.
And maybe I'll just add, given the looming start of school year, and the fact that Ms. Kester is also in a transition, I don't think this is necessarily our highest priority right now. It's something that we want to be thinking about. And perhaps I can ask Ms. Kester to take the lead on this so that this doesn't then fall on your shoulders to have to take the lead on this at this moment as you've just stepped into your new position.
Madam Chair, thank you for that consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Holst.
Yeah, I just want to make sure, I think I'm capturing this. So we're just looking for general efficiencies, like we share legal with you. We don't share HR with you. You share with, you don't share with the hospital maintenance or engineering, but you do share HR.
No longer, but we share legal.
Okay. But so that's what we're talking about. We're just trying to figure out between the organizations, what's the most efficient. So yeah, that sounds like a great conversation that we should have on occasion.
And what provides the best service for the schools.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ms. Kester.
I'll just add to kind of I'm thinking about the possibility. We have a really good working relationship with the facilities committee at the school district. We also have a great working relationship in we being engineering with Director Olin and her staff. I would say that when it comes, we have the same type of relationship with building maintenance. I would say that just because it is a closer relationship, because, you know, we all work for the same organization, we all have the same rules. There's probably more synergy in making in making sure that when Nate identifies a preventative maintenance item, you know, he's able to either take care of it or flag it for us, and then he moves it up on our list. And so there's these very integrated conversations between our CBJ's building maintenance and engineering's deferred maintenance that I think create some efficiencies. So that's also kind of looking at it through that lens. May not be. I don't think that the idea is to like sweep the floors for the school district necessarily, because there are some duties that really need to be housed in the schools. I mean, maintenance needs to still be housed in the schools, but I think that was really when we were looking at preventative maintenance in particular, because CBJ owns these facilities and we really care that they stay, you know, really highly functioning. Would that be a way to help with that goal?
And I see no more comments. Ms. Kester, is there anything else on this topic? I know the item B is the annual JSD operational maintenance cost, but I don't know that we have that. Is that correct? No, we don't have that yet.
Yeah.
Oh,
We have it just in paper form. I didn't get it to Ms. Kester in time to get it put onto our agenda.
okay, so maybe we can just move that to the next meeting because we haven't had time to take a look at it. Thank you so much, Director Rowland. Ms. Kester, are we ready to move on to item 5? And I think this is a lot of description. I know we have some material as well, so.
Thank you. So I first, I included in your packet links to the websites for all the alternative schools. The committee had asked to look at alternative schools. Then Superintendent Hauser and actually Kristen sent me a lot of information on each one of the schools. Only one is included in your packet just because I get too many emails. So the rest of the brochures are included. They were included the same day online, but they're also included as a handout here. So I'm with that packet explanation, because navigating your packet is important. I am going to hand it over to the school district to talk about their schools and programming.
And if I could also just preface this, this came up for me in kind of substantially when we looked at the diagrams of all the schools and where different programs are located in the actual school buildings. And my interest is really, as our enrollment declines, are we using our buildings most efficiently? This report talks about that as well. What makes the most sense for the way that we're using our buildings? So that's where this really came up. It's like, what are the rules like charter school? Is it normal for a charter school to be in a school? Yada, yada, yada. So that's kind of where this came up for me and why I was hoping to have this conversation.
Well, thank you.
Superintendent Hauser.
Thank you for the question to the chair. And so I guess I will do a quick overview. I would encourage everyone to go to the website, visit the school's website. I often think that no one tells a story about a school than the staff that work in the school and that live in the school and work with the students every single day. And you get a chance to see the pictures of the students enjoying being part of the school. What I would really, especially the schools that were requested that more information be provided on, I want to try to provide a little bit larger context about, Yakushi Dakahiti, about the charter school, Juneau Community Charter School, Montessori Borealis, and the TCLL program. One of the things that I've been in education for 26 years, I spent and have worked at every grade level, open optional schools, Northern Lights ABC schools. One of the things that I've learned over the going into 26 years now, is that there's as many different learning styles as there are students out there. It's about, making sure that we're meeting the needs of the students and addressing their learning styles, what supports that they need, but also working with the families and making sure that we're providing opportunities and options. One of the things that when we talk about the schools that were brought up is we're looking at really schools that are, TCL program, looking at Yakuski, which is kind of an alternative program, looking at Juneau Community School, which is a charter school, as well as Montessori Borealis, which is, follow the Montessori model of instruction. These are all schools that really provide choice for families. Some families are very much in support of, I want my student to have a, traditional high school experience. We want to make sure that they have access to sports, to have access to student government, to debate, to everything that comes along with your quote unquote traditional high school or school experience. But there are also families out there for a number of different reasons that want to look for different options. Homebridge, being able to have a school where they can work from home and do homeschool, and being able to have that flexibility because it works in their schedule, because they traveled for whatever reasons that might be. And so when we look at the programs that were requested, that we provide some more information, what we really are looking at, and I just want to make sure that the committee understands, is, we're looking at programs that really help meet a need for families out in the community that are part of the Juneau School District, that fall in and are part of the district, are accessible to the students as free public education, but they provide a different approach to education. When you look at Juneau Community Charter School, it's a K-8 school that really focuses on natural resources and an extension of the classroom. Students really are focusing on, kind of the outdoor nature and really having those connections. And it is also a charter school, which means they have their own contract with the district. So they get funded through the district, but they have their own contract which outlines the mission, the focus, and they have their own advisory board that helps provide guidance. And, they look and hire teachers through the process and administrators, and they actually help govern the school and the mission and the vision of the school itself. But it's still part of the Juneau School District. It just is a different way of approaching providing education for students that a lot of parents look at and say, I really am excited and interested in having my students attend a charter school. And they'll look at the charter school, they'll look at the charter for the school, they'll see if it aligns with their ideas of what they would like to see for their student for that free public education. And so that's, a school like Juneau Community Charter School, but also there are families that look towards programs like the Montessori Borealis, which in the Juneau School District provides some, early grade pre-K work, but also kindergarten through 6th grade and an adolescent 7th and 8th grade program. And that follows, like I said earlier, the methodology of Montessori. And it is a public school. Students have access to it. Families have access to it. Which really means there is no charge for them to attend that school. And it is part of the Juneau School District. And, they are focusing on smaller classrooms, really trying to focus and accommodate each child's unique learning styles and pace in a supportive atmosphere. And so those are some of the, focuses using the Montessori teaching method. Of course, the Tlingit Culture, Language, and Literacy program is for kindergarten through 6th grade. And just this year, we're adding 7th grade. And next year, we will be adding 8th grade to that program. So it will be a K through 8th grade program. And that program really is focusing on providing Tlingit cultural immersion. And really tying to place-based instruction, celebrating and respecting and integrating that into daily instructional, standards that are happening. And so that program, again, families are very interested in immersion programs, very interested in, the Tlingit immersion program. And so there are families that are interested in having their students explore and be part of that program in the Juneau School District. And when we look at Yakuski Dakihiti, and wanting to make sure we're providing that high school opportunity for students that might need credit recovery, might need a smaller environment, might need a more targeted, tailored approach that has more flexibility. We're able to have Yakuski Dakihiti, which really helps students believe that they can achieve and support students to make sure that they have the resources and tailored instruction to finish up high school, earn the degree, and take that next step into adulthood, whether it be college, whether it be career, whatever that might look like. And so that's just kind of an overview of the programs that were requested. I again encourage the committee to go on the website, take a look at the schools, read a little bit more about it. Also talk to parents that are, have their students there, because I've got to say, probably the best advocates for schools are the parents, because they love their schools, they love their neighborhood schools, they love their alternative schools, their charter schools, and their school of choice.
Well, thank you very much, Superintendent. And I have family members that have gone to Yakuski, Takahiti, and it was really transformative for them. So yeah. Ms. Gajewski, did you have a question?
I do. Thank you so much for this remedial info for those of us who are not on the board. I learned things. So I always thought there was a board for the charter school that did governing or something. So what if the title of this thing says tuition-free optional programs? So in your words, you use some slightly different words for each one. So I just want to make sure I understand. These are all JSD run, governed. The board controls all of these things. Is that correct?
Through the chair, these are all part of the Juneau School District. The Juneau Community Charter School is a charter school, which means that they actually have a contract with the district to function as a charter school, and that charter is approved by the state. They do have an advisory board that helps govern Juneau Community Charter School. The other schools fall under, the Board of Education, and, they do not have a separate board that helps outline policy and procedures. But as we look at the running of the schools, they still are and follow the board policies and are governed by the board. It's just when you look at the instructional, if you will, maybe a good way of saying it's methodology. Juneau Community Charter School has their own charter school that has to meet the requirements of the state of Alaska to be considered a charter school. And they enter into the contract with the Juneau School District to be able to offer the charter school opportunity in the Juneau School District and be considered part of the Juneau School District and that tuition-free public education.
But the advisory board is advisory. The board that governs the charter school are JSD, the JSD board.
Yes.
Mr. Holst, did you have something to add? No. Okay, thank you. Madam Mayor.
Thank you. So I'm a little confused in this. So for the general charter and the Montessori, I'm surprised to see that it's tuition free. So how does that work? They stress smaller school size. So the cost per student must be more than your average student because there's more teachers per students. So how does that work and how much do each of those students cost?
Director.
In simple terms, they go through the foundation formula as an individual school. Montessori Borealis currently is now. They have
Your mic is not on.
They are considered their own school building, and therefore they run through the formula as their own school based upon their own enrollment and their needs. That gives them their figure. TCLL is currently not its own school with the Department of Education. It is actually part of Harborview Elementary, and it is considered it is counted with that school. Yakuski Takahiti is an alternative high school that does not have 180 students. So they are added to the highest enrolled high school that we have, which currently is Thunder Mountain. And then what's the last one? What do I have left? Charter school. We run through it is a school in itself as a charter school, and it runs through the formula as itself. And then what we do in the finance office is we run it through the formula. We take out our 4% administrative costs that goes on that for the district to do HR, payroll, finance for the charter school. And they receive their whole entire foundation formula, also their portion of the local appropriation as per state statute. In regards per a student, I have never broken them down that way because of the way that our budget is dealt with. It is not dealt in the essence of each school gets the dollar amount per a child. It is one big budget. It's built upon the PTR that the school board decides upon. The only formula that we do for students is we have set aside a supply allocation, as we call it. Elementary get 101 per student, middle school gets 112, and high school gets 132. And this actually takes it times their enrollment, and then that is what the building's budget that the principal has the authority to purchase supplies for their building. And so each, there's not technically a way that we actually count a student where they're worth a dollar amount, because our budget comes in as one big bulk dollar and we divvy it out as the school board budgets with their PTR.
Thank you, Director Olin. Mayor, I think you had a follow-up, is that correct? And I'm just going to say we will go past one because the last item on the agenda is also very important, but Mayor Weldon, we'll just have to fill you in later.
That sounds great. So Montessori Borealis was 180 schools, students. And how many does the charter school have?
They are projected at 84 for next year.
Okay.
How about the others? Do you know what the other numbers are?
Yakusuke Dakahiti is scheduled at 72. I will say Yakusuke does take into consideration the count for Juneau Youth Services, which is now Search, which I do not know the name of the new facility, but their kids are counted within Yakusuke and receive services from Yakusuke. TCLL is currently being slated to have 115 students, K through 7.
Is there any other follow-up?
No, I'm just surprised because I thought the parents were paying the difference, because it seems like, quite frankly, going to be speaking frankly, that they're getting a pretty good deal for small class sizes with few students, and as opposed to a regular class size of 30 kids. But I'll leave that up to the school board.
Ms. Glaszewski.
Just to follow up, just a quick question. So they do, if I understood what you said, they get the same, they get the dollar amount filtered through various ways that you filter it. They got 10 kids, they get 10 times X, and then whatever plus the CBJ portion. So they're getting the same as every other school.
Yes, the charter school is, yes, correct.
Oh, and the others as well.
Yes.
Everybody. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. And I think this whole conversation sort of came up, the light went on when we're thinking about the possibility of closing a school, and then we see what's in all of our schools. And, you know, I do think about equity. So we talk about very small class sizes, and that's very important for some students. And I agree, it is very important for some students. But then as we think about what we as a community are doing when we are maintaining, especially when we talk about very high dollar amounts, just making sure we're kind of being very clear-eyed about providing equity to our students across the board. So that's, I think, my driving interest. Ms. Sorensen.
Well, and I just want to say that, you know, the optional programs are available. They're open enrollment, you know, anybody who, I mean, the charter school would love to have more students. You know, there's nothing, you know, there's no hurdles between enrollment and whatever. I mean, it's whether or not that option appeals to some individual parent.
There are cultural barriers, though.
Well, possibly with TCLL, but I mean, with the other programs, you know, there are parents that maybe are not interested in spending, you know, making the kind of parental commitment that the charter school asks of parents. Or there might be parents that don't feel that, you know, an ordinary program at Gastineau is preferable to, you know, the Montessori model. I mean, it's what appeals to parents. These are options for families, but it's not like someplace where there's like this restricted opportunity to to participate. That's not the case.
Ms. Glastonski.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's my question. So anybody who wants to, there's no limit. There's only like 10 to go here and 5. There's no, you don't have to compete to get in. If you want, you're in. Is that what you're saying? Well, oh, okay. So that's, yeah, that's,
Mike, please. Yeah. Thank you.
There's a limit, but I'm going to turn it over to Cassie to.
Director Rowland.
So the TCLL, the Montessori Borealis and the Juneau Charter School all have a lottery program. So parents apply usually during the month of March. I think it is. Yeah, look at Kristen usually sends out the flyers. And so it's usually in March. The lottery comes in, they review all the parent files that have submitted for children. Usually the only reason if a child is put onto a wait list is because we have too many students in one grade level and we have maxed that teacher's classroom capacity to what we have. So there are parents that are waiting on wait lists for certain grade levels that we have at charter school does not, but I do believe Montessori Borealis has a wait list right now and TCLL does not have one either, the last I checked, but.
For the question.
And then the other part I wanted to add too was our Montessori Borealis has a preschool program. And those parents do pay for that program. There is a tuition cost for that due to the fact that our pre-K do not go through the foundation formula. There is no mechanism for us to collect revenue for them. So the parents do pay for their students to go to Montessori Borealis for pre-K, but they are in a mixed classroom with pre-Kers, kindergartners and first graders. So they get that development in there.
Thank you. And just one other, it's more a question and possibly a concern is when I talk about cultural barriers, I'm talking much less about the TCLL program as charter school and Montessori Borealis. Frankly, I don't know what the demographics are in those schools, but I do know parents who have children in those schools and they tend to be very white, as I understand it. And I'm very interested that we as a community aren't spending more money on our already more advantaged students than we are on our less advantaged students. So I think that would be, as we continue to think about this and we think about maintaining our buildings and the relationships between the schools, I'm just very interested in that. Okay, thank you. Mr. Holst, did you have something to add?
Yeah, just a little bit on I think what you see is the reflection of our community and at least our perception on the school board that our community wants choice, right? And to your last point briefly about it actually does cost us a little more to have TCLL and charter because we add the transportation component that allows anybody anywhere, but we do it for the reasons you want us to, which is so that transportation is not a barrier to get to those buildings. And then just to kind of keep in the back of your mind, one of the peculiarities of the small school option, which, when you can look at it, and I've had a lot of these conversations where it seems like, well, that's got to cost us more. That's going to cost us more. The example last year where we take the Montessori school becomes a school under the funding formula, we actually generate more dollars per child. But as Cassie explains to us, it flows all into the entire school district and it's spread around all of them. But because it is a school and it is a small school, the smaller the school generally, the more dollars per capita based on the funding formula are generated for the school. So when we start to get to the point where people make really common sense suggestions like, oh, that's a small school, we should shut down, we'll save money. We just have to really look carefully at the numbers because sometimes it has the opposite.
Yeah, and
Throw that back out there and
that's good. And I just want to put it out here. I am not suggesting shutting any of these schools down. I am just very interested in, maybe where they're housed. Are we sure we're making the right decisions? Definitely not interested in that. Thank you. Ms. Glashow.
So does that mean if you call these separate schools, you get, if there's only 115, you get kids in it, you get more formula for that school, or the 84 kids, you get more formula for that school? Is that?
they come in categories. I'm looking at Cassie because, I will
So why don't we have like 10 of those and make them all small? I know, I mean,
You know, yeah, there are board members who we played with some numbers, but we want to do where
yeah, I know, I'm just,
things align. But yeah, it's a totally reasonable question.
okay.
Yeah, Director Orland, did you have anything to add to that?
The optional programs also for Juneau Community Charter, it actually has to go through an application process to become a charter school through the State Board of Education. Montessori Borealis and Yakusuke Dakihiti are both called alternative schools, and they actually go through a application process also to meet what the definition of alternative schools are. And basically an alternative school is a different method of a normal brick and mortar education with class periods and things of that nature. So with Montessori, there's combined classrooms and child play, and feel free to pipe in if I'm getting it wrong, because I might. And like for Yakusuke Dakihiti, they do like 5-week intensive semester kind of things where they focus on one core class and then they move on through the process. TCLL right now is basically kind of a school within a school. And what we're going to eventually do once they receive their numbers and we get the whole K-8, they will become, and we will apply for them to be an alternative school, just like Montessori Borealis and Yakusuke Dakihiti. Alternative schools within the foundation formula are treated differently than a normal brick and mortar situation, how normal neighborhood schools work. So due to those applications as to we filed, the state of Alaska triggers those into different categories.
Very, very.
So that's why you can't just have like 10 of them, because you have to
Very helpful.
actually apply for it. Mhm.
Are there any other thoughts or questions before we move on to our final topic? This was extremely useful. Thank you. Ms. Kester, the facility master plan.
Thank you, Chair Hill. So this was a bit of a research project to try to kind of,
Copies in the back if anyone needs one.
yeah. To try to figure out where we left off. I want to thank Board Member Holst for letting us know that this existed. And I think one of the challenges, which is kind of the reason this is on your agenda today, of it not being at our fingertips, is because it was never adopted. And so when you look back through the record and you have the relevant packet from the Joint Facilities Committee meeting on your table, when you look back through the packet, it looks like the committee contracted in 2015 for this study, did a lot of work, did a lot of back and forth, the culmination of kind of bringing it to the next phase. There was a lot of discussion on the committee of the value of it, kind of some back and forth. That's all in the minutes in there. And, you know, if you read the meeting minutes, staff was supposed to come back with a memo and an action plan. And that just, I can find draft memos from my staff, but I can't find any official documentation. So Board Member Holst, I don't know if that never happened, but essentially when the Facilities Committee met again a couple of years later, it was not on the agenda. All that is to say, there may be some value in revisiting this document and taking it to its end. There may not. Regardless, when you read it, which you know, I was like, wow, why didn't I start here? I've been trying to make up this matrix when someone who's like, does this for a living, has done all of this work. And so I would really like to find a way to not lose all of this work, but also make it relevant for today's committee, today's, you know, population estimates and, you know, the members that are before us. I'm not sure how to do that, so I'm looking for guidance. It could be as simple as the members, you know, spend some time, read through it, decide, hey, we should pull this piece out and incorporate it into the matrix. Or it could be kind of like, maybe we should pick this back up, see if we can get a contract to take it to fruition. That's certainly not something that would be done by the end of September. But again, you know, this document answers questions like, which facility provides the best learning environment? And, you know, questions that I know you all have been asking and we've been struggling to answer. So I will leave it at that and allow for some committee discussion on the document.
And I will, just to build on that conversation, and then maybe we can ask Mr. Holst to see if he can refresh his memory, but if you have the book in front of you and you flip to page 67 and page 68, and this is kind of something that Mr. Holst got at when he compared Floyd Dryden with Santa Kahini. These 2 pages talks about educational adequacy challenges with lists for each school. You know, so it's a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about. So, Mr. Holst, did you want to jump in, since you are the only one of us involved in this process, and just kind of give us some thoughts, and then we can kind of have a conversation about this.
I wish I had a concise answer. I'm sorry. Doesn't mean I'm going to speak long. I wish I had
You can.
to why it wasn't adopted. It was worked on. But I just just because we're all in this, my recollection is that it started to become a bit politicized.
Yeah.
In the dimension, and then the concern that it was, to some people, it started to point really clearly, oh, we need to close down some schools. And to others, that isn't what the report said. And I think it sort of faded in, this is just my perception, away, because it really wasn't being used as it was, it's hard to say, because I think what sort of emerged was that there were different motivations perhaps behind why this came together. I think the formal motivation for why it came together is perfectly sound, which is, let's understand this huge investment that our community makes in our schools. But I think that's the only place where it sort of collapsed, was there was some breakdown of why did we do this and what does it conclude? I recall at that time that there was, in here you'll see usage levels. And there were invitations to several members of the assembly. I don't know, Ms. Gladys, if you ever got to go on one of those, but because there was this conclusion, it felt like drawn by some people that, buildings are empty, classrooms are empty, and the district staff was, well, no, they're not empty. And then several people, some people in the assembly took some visits and realized the super simple reality that, actually, it looks really different when you get in the building than it does, on some of this paper. I can't offer any more than that. That's a little bit of my biased view, I'm sure. Anything more would be speculation, but it just sort of stopped there. Not because of anything the report said, but because of the conversations it sort of created, which tended to be a little more divisive than bringing people together. So I think there's a lot here that we could work on. We all have the, if nobody, just like the sensitivity, I actually wasn't worried about you in that last comment. I thought, Ms. Hale, you very sensitively said to me, I'm not talking about closing down a school. I actually wasn't thinking about that, but I think that's kind of you're sensitive to our sensitivity to that whole question, right? Which is part of why it's just sort of faded in the background.
I became sensitive to that question at the first meeting. Actually, I was sensitive to that question already. And I will point out page 7 of the 2017 minutes includes a letter from only the school board members of the joint committee. So obviously there was enough sort of sense of division at that time that those school board members felt compelled to write their own letter. And in some ways, I'll call on you very shortly,
That's
Ms.
fine.
Waliszewski. In many ways, one of my goals in this committee this year has been to put it out there that we have a lot of money that we have to invest in our schools. And is there a better way for us to be managing those? And if that means closing one building, but not those individual schools, how can we set up the next people that touch this in a way that they can actually talk about it? Because if we don't talk about it, everyone will be afraid to talk about it, and then things will fall apart like this one did. So, Ms. Waliszewski.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out what the heck happened is all. And there's minutes from March and June. Your name's on the memo, Mr. Holtz. You wrote that, no, I'm just
And we
kidding.
did several of those things on that memo.
Yeah,
Right.
I don't know. I was here for this committee and I thought it was working and it was gonna come up with the report and I was gonna see it and then I didn't and then I forgot about it because lots of reports we're supposed to get. So I appreciate that we found it again. I mean, somebody spent a lot of time and money on this. I don't know how much, but it's not cheap. I assume we should look at it again and see if it's useful. I mean, that's a lot of money.
And there's like.
I mean, I haven't read this, okay, so I have no idea what's in it, because I didn't read it.
Like those pages that I referred to, pages 67 and 68, somebody spent a lot of effort looking at those things. One possibility that I'd like to explore, and maybe it goes on next meeting's agenda. I'd like to explore the possibility that one of the recommendations coming out of this facilities committee this year is that this report be finished. That extra work be done and it be brought up to now, because what it does, this and the matrix that then can draw upon this, is it sets up the next committee that touches this much better than we were set up when we started here, Ms. Sorensen?
Well, I was just gonna say,
Yep.
it also provides some longitudinal support to the entire arc of what we've been talking about.
Right.
So can I ask Mr. Hulse a question? Did the committee Ms. Kester said, and a couple of years later, the next time we have minutes, did the committee just stop meeting for a while? This joint, so it just kind of faded away and started up again later? Is that?
Thank you, Mr. Holmes.
Yeah, I mean, when I first joined the board, the purpose of and we call it kind of to this day at the school district, project team. Because the way it had operated, this joint committee was about when we go to bond on major projects that you need to pay for. And the facilities committee of our JSD always had CBJ engineering. So we didn't need a assembly to school board member committee to decide on projects. We did that. You guys gave us money and then we spent the money in coordination with the engineering. So the only purpose of the group until this came along, and if I recall, I think part of this was, so it was, I would think you're going to find that the assembly versus the school district commissioned this study.
Yes,
I think that's
right. That's what I.
None of us were saying, we want this study. And I think it was because it was, well, I think we're all smart enough to know that there was some people that had,
Correct.
it wasn't our imagination. There were some people out there that operated on a perception that the schools were partially empty
Correct.
and tough decisions need to be made. And we're going to show you that that these decisions have to be made. Yeah, I think that's kind of how it was perceived. But yeah, after that, we sort of reverted to, so this is a very different sort of purpose of this committee than it was 9 years ago, which is fine. Because it was really only bonds, big projects that we would decide on together. That was why we would meet.
So the joint committee though commissioned this study is the committee that Mary Becker chaired. It wasn't the assembly, it was the joint committee.
The assembly asked for the assembly funded it.
Yep.
And then it was brought to this committee.
Yep.
As the vehicle for this discussion.
Okay. That was mine.
Mr. Muldoon.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'd like to thank Director Kester for her remarks when introducing this. I've been on the facilities and the finance committee for our district since I've gotten here, and it's been my white whale. I've worked with Director Olin on all of these items piecemeal, and one of the difficulties with it has been that we don't have it all unified and comprehensive. And I think that's even reflected in a little bit of here where it feels like a almost final draft type of thing. And so I'm not opposed to this being a goal. But I think if we don't incrementalize it, we run the risk of just coming out with another almost finished draft. You know, it's like USB cable stands for universal serial. It's supposed to be the one plug to end them all. And now there's 10 different USB plugs. So I love plans. I love data. I love documents. I'm up to my eyeballs in them right now. So I think that what would perhaps be best is that I don't think our facilities committee is going to be meeting this afternoon, but we can work with staff moving forward to look at what we have, because we do have like we have separate ones specific to the district on energy usage, efficiencies, and things of that nature. So I think that we can work on doing more consolidating of that data and information, get it into the packet for the next meeting. So that way, as a collective, we can discuss those.
That would be great. I really appreciate that. And, you know, as you're working with your facilities committee, it might be good to say, hey, we're taking a look at this again. And I like your idea about finalize it, but incrementally, like actually know why we're finalizing it, right? Don't just finalize it because we want to have a final document, something that we can put on the web, but actually, you know, how would this work to help the school district, to help this committee, and to work with any kind of a matrix, decision matrix that we come up with, so we can think about how we characterize that. Do we have additional comments and thoughts? Ms. Gashevsky?
I think what everybody's saying is we want to look at this and see what's useful and take the useful things and update them if they're useful. Is that?
It's also take a look at it and think try to decide if it is useful, which I actually think it is. And then do we want to again contract to bring it up to date and finish it? And what does finishing it mean? You know, what purpose does that serve? So
Right.
yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Mr. Hauser, did you have? No. And Ms. Kester, I know you're taking notes, but I'm looking, and you're very good at that. I'm looking to you to kind of let us know what you think about this conversation and where that might be able to lead us.
I think there's definitely a lot of value in here. So I don't want to lose that value. And what I hear is committee members are going to take a look, do some homework, read it, see what's useful. There also will be some thought into maybe one of the recommendations being finish the study. It might have to be, as board member Muldoon said, it might have to be kind of in phases, right? Because there's a lot in here, but let's as one of the options, think about recommending that the next iteration of this committee finish this study. What does that look like? It looks like a contract, et cetera, right? So you guys have that information. So those are the two follow-ups that I would be working on. One is more staff, right? What would it look like to finish this product? And the first one is more homework for the committee. What do you want to pull from this product? You read it and you say half of it's garbage because it's old. You read it and say half of it's political and doesn't serve me. You read it and say, wow, we should really be using 7 of these factors as our matrix. And they even have a matrix on page 10 that, you know, gets us halfway there. Is that helpful? Okay.
That is very helpful. And just a thought kind of like sort of dripped into my mind, and I don't know if it's possible at all. Jensen Yorbalot did this work, and if there were a way, even though, you know, we're not right now doing a contract, but if there were a way to sort of bring them into the conversation, if we had any sort of contractual dollars or something, that might be nice, because it would actually be good before we even put a contract out. If they have any of the principals left who did this investigation, for them to kind of say, well, this is what I think you guys need to do, given what I'm hearing you saying at this committee meeting. So I don't know if that's possible.
Is Nathan still here? I don't even know. Nathan Coffey?
Yeah.
Is he still here?
No.
No.
No. Oh, okay.
We did reach out to Mr. Wall and got some information, and I think he had as good remember, I don't know, a board member host your memory is probably better, but he was kind of like, whoa, that was a while ago. But certainly asking him in the context of resurrecting the conversation would be different. So I will put that on my to-do list for the next meeting.
Okay, thank you. Do we have anything else before the committee? I think, do we have public participation? We do not. We have a proposed next meeting date of September 7th. Ms. Kester, I think you probably have a pretty good idea after this conversation, what might be on the agenda for the next meeting. And if we do a meeting in September 7th and then shoot for one in late September before the election, does that sound in general good to everybody? And then we're kind of moving towards wrapping up.
I'm on flying at that time, so I won't be able to be here.
You're flying on September 7th at noon.
Just, well. Yeah, I'll be on a plane, but that doesn't mean you.
Does anybody else have a conflict? You have a conflict.
Yeah, I'm on the board of directors for the Southeast Regional Resource Corporation. So they have a board meeting that day, an all-day board meeting on that day. So if that's the only day it can work, I can see if I can sneak out for the meeting. But
Should we,
How about the 6th?
how about the 6th?
unfortunately, I'm still in the board meeting. It's a few days.
How about the 7th, which is a Friday?
Or the 8th.
Oh, the 8th, I mean, thank you. Somebody can count.
Sorry. Why don't I'll work and pull away because I think it'd be easier for me just to step away and you guys find a time. So if the 7th works, I will go ahead and talk to Cirque and let him know that I'll need to step away during the board meeting.
I can't.
All right.
Any other? That's the chamber forum on the 7th.
That would be better if I'll be in town.
Oh, the chambers is being used that day?
No, sorry. That's the
You're
candidate forum for the Chamber of Commerce on the 7th.
problems, and I just wonder if it might be better to do a,
7th is unworkable for me.
so should we shoot for the 6th? And Superintendent Hauser, you think that you can work around your,
Yeah, I should be able to step away. Yeah.
so Director Kester, will you be able to try to work with that date?
Absolutely. I will work with that date and let members know if there are any lingering snafus and please do the same if you find things popping up in your schedule.
And then before I gavel out, if everybody can spend a little time poking at this thing, I know it's not the sort of thing that you read cover to cover, and there's lots and lots and lots of pictures, so that's good. So it's not as deep a read as it might still look like at first. But there's some really great information, and Ms. Kester, thank you so much for bringing it to our attention, and Mr. Holst. And I think we are adjourned at 1:28 p.m.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
She can't do the 17th.
She can't do the 7th. You can't, he can't. So